It may be easy now to see Iron Man as inevitable, but you know who wasn't as convinced? This planet a mere 12 years ago. For some Screen Ranters, that may be a lifetime, and that's just how Marvel wants it. The MCU was anything but a sure thing, and we're here to remind you of what production looked like back in 2008 when the man in the tin can was still a C-list character. Today we know the MCU as a well-oiled machine, built on the success of a movie about a well-oiled machine. It's best not to think about the mechanics of how the suit works, because what we think is really important is to get behind the helmet, get a good look at the arc reactor that was Marvel Studios, and really talk about what was going on in the production department. So let's strip this down to the parts and unlock the secrets at the dawn of Iron Man. Let's take it back to the 90s. While many of us were playing Mario Kart on SNES, sporting our Rachel haircuts, Marvel was struggling as a company. Marvel needed cash and offered to sell Sony the movie rights to Spider-Man and most every other character under its control, including Thor, Black Panther, and Iron Man, for only $25 million. In today's money, that's approximately the cost of the flower petals sent to line the path Robert Downey Jr. walks, but we digress. Originally, Sony said meh to the whole thing and only cared about Spider-Man as a character with any cultural relevance. They demanded only the wall crawler, and henceforth, confusing cinematic universe licensing agreements were solidified. Sony took the webhead for a sticky $10 million, and Marvel tried to get other movies made with other studios with limited success, or them never happening at all. More on that later. In the year 2000, Marvel teamed up with Fox to release X-Men, which ended up being a huge win for the studio, and thus an angel named Kevin Feige was gifted his nerdy wings. X-Men was his first on-screen credit, and Feige was hired by Avi Arad, who made him an executive vice president of Marvel's new movie wing. Marvel set up movie deals with Ghost Rider, Fantastic Four, Daredevil, and Blade to keep afloat, but in 2005, Marvel decided to just try and make movies for themselves and keep the dollars in their own wallets. I mean, who wants all those production lawyers around anyways, right? The bank Merrill Lynch gave Marvel a $525 million loan to make a proposed 10 films based on the characters it still had the rights to, which Hollywood deemed their second-tier superheroes. In 2006, they got the rights back to Iron Man and limited rights to Hulk. Avi Arad figured they had so much depth in these characters, they could make at least one movie each with a strong opening weekend, perhaps try another character, and then hopefully sequels on the ones that worked to pay off the loan. The catch? If it didn't work, then Marvel would lose the rights to all their characters. Marvel went to Comic-Con with no scripts, no cast, and no Iron Man to roll the dice. How lucky are we to live in the MCU universe that didn't come up snake eyes? But a little gratitude to the universe, it'll make you feel good. In the 2000s, if you're looking for an Iron Man that has to be a bankable hit, you need a big actor with lots of personal issues for your Tony Stark. Cue the Iron Man casting of... Wait, this says Tom Cruise. Oh snap, really? This is gonna happen? Well, Cruise definitely fits the bill, and the casting of Maverick makes sense if you're planning on simply taking a guy in a flight suit and sticking him in a suit that flies. The specifics of why it didn't come to pass are Hollywood lore, but it just seemed like another superhero film that was going to slip through the cracks with New Line Studios, not sure Iron Man would work for audiences. However, when Jon Favreau was awarded the director's chair, he thought RDJ was uniquely suited for Tony, saying, "The best and worst moments of Robert's life have been in the public eye. He had to find an inner balance to overcome obstacles that went far beyond his career. That's Tony Stark." In 2006, Robert Downey Jr. was more known for his battles with addiction than acting, and though being a talented actor, nobody wanted to work with him. He was like a 2006 version of Lindsay Lohan, but people weren't paying attention to him because they were busy watching 2006 Lindsay Lohan. Regardless, Marvel originally was not interested as he had never been in a hit movie, but Jon Favreau staked his job on the casting decision, saying he was perfect to play a likable a-hole. Turns out Favreau has an acute awareness for such things.
I'm sorry, this is the fun bee. The humdrum bee is back there.
Favreau himself wasn't the first choice in the director's Rolodex, but Feige had an eye for his work when putting together the Iron Man team. Names like Joss Whedon, Nick Cassavetes, and even Quentin Tarantino were all hovering around the project, but in 2006, Favreau landed the gig. Up until then, he was mostly known for comedies and as an actor, but since he had worked with Avi Arad on Daredevil, he was able to get Marvel's blessing in the end. When putting together the team for Iron Man, it wasn't only Robert Downey Jr. that came in late. Paul Bettany kind of fell into the role of Tony Stark's butler, who was made into an AI because Batman had already played out the whole billionaire butler sidekick shtick. Quick quiz, did y'all know that Jarvis is an acronym? Well, get ready to impress your geek buddies with this one. When casting, they thought Bettany had the reliably serviceable British charm essential to portray the role of just a rather very intelligent system. Don't ask me what Veronica stands for. Favreau and Bettany had worked together on the rom-com Wimbledon and become friends. The truth is, Bettany never got the full script for Iron Man and only did the voiceover for Jarvis in a 2-hour session as a favor. He had no idea what the film was about and still may not, as he's mentioned he's never actually watched the Iron Man movies. Now his makeup for a single take as Vision requires more time in makeup than he spent on the first film. Since we're on the Iron Man Buddies B-list, we've got to address the Terrence Howard in the room. For the first film, Howard was brought in to play James Rhodes, better known as Rhodey, then even better known as the War Machine. Terrence Howard was hired at the top of his game, coming off Hustle and Flow, which gave him an Oscar nod, and to balance out the cast while RDJ was still a risk. He was paid more than anyone in the cast of the first Iron Man, but was famously difficult to work with on set, and although he's never said it in public, people close to Favreau say that the director was far from a happy Hogan once he saw Howard in the editing room. They had to work with what was usable, but when time came to re-up his contract for Iron Man 2, the team at Marvel took the extra cash Howard demanded and invested it in Downey instead. Downey didn't seem to mind. Fans also didn't seem to have many issues with a new War Machine, but when it came to another Iron Man supporting role, the people decided to make their voices heard. Originally, Agent Coulson didn't have a name or anything other than a quick cameo moment as an agent. Clark Gregg added in the extra charm of the agent who's now become the Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like the classic hair club for men, Coulson isn't just an employee, he's a client. People could relate to the fact that Agent Coulson was as much of a fan of the superheroes he was working with as a partner, and Marvel decided to bring Gregg back for the other movies and eventually develop the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series around him. Without the scene at the end of the first Iron Man, we may not have ended up with the cinematic universe we got. In a bit of Hollywood lore, Robert Downey Jr. deviated from the loose Iron Man script when he uttered the iconic "I am Iron Man" at the end of the movie. Head of Marvel Kevin Feige said of this moment that the improvisation inspired us to go further in trusting ourselves to find balance by staying true to the comics and the spirit of the comics, but not being afraid to adapt and evolve and to change things. They told the extras on set at the time that the line was actually part of a dream sequence and no one thought enough to leak it. So to retread, where's your Tom Cruise now, huh? Look, we're not talking smack, but we saw what happened when Tom tried to will his cinematic universe into existence, right? Ooh, mummy. Sorry, Universal, but while the Dark Universe went dark, I'd say the MCU is ironclad. Oh, I hate myself for saying that. Even though Iron Man went into the first two films with the loose morsels of a script, clipped and taped together elements of previous attempts at Iron Man treatments and scripts made their way in to influence the movies. One of those early attempts came from a man who ended up with more than a couple cameos over the years. That's right. Stan the Man with the Plan Lee actually penned an early version before the project ever took shape. The script was supposedly decent, as Tom Rothman, who was president of Fox at the time, said Lee's screenplay helped him to finally get Iron Man as a character. Ultimately, the script was never used, and Lee didn't get a scripting credit. Is there any unexpected place Stan Lee doesn't end up in? Could Lee be the Watcher in our real world too? One would hope. The best Easter eggs are the ones you never saw coming, and the plan was to always have little shoutouts for comic book fans from the beginning. What was never part of the plan, however, was that every frame of each movie would be analyzed to the point that these Easter eggs could be used to connect the films together. Now a staple of every MCU movie, it's hard to fathom that in the first Iron Man, Captain America's shield was just being used as a prop. A special effects tech added a little flair to the scene, and no one thought it would really be noticed. This is also true with the end-credit scene featuring Nick Fury. It was done in reshoots as a quick addition and a fun add-on to get fans excited. Looking back now, that moment set up the entire future for Marvel from the moment Samuel L. Jackson said, "I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers initiative." Phew! What is it about set stories that gets us so excited at ScreenRant? It's crazy how quickly some of these stories get erased by success, don't you think? How long can you catch lightning in a bottle, right? It takes a village to make a film, but when you get to this level of cinematic franchise, we're talking about mega cities. Let's discuss other on-set stories from the MCU in the comments and subscribe for more from us here at ScreenRant.